Good morning. I'm Andrea with Happy Cloud Creations, and I am jumping on because it is week 3 of the Joyful Meadows Quilt Along. If you haven't started yet, it's not too late to join in. Um, week 1 was cutting our fabric, week 2 was making flying geese, and this week we are making half square triangles. So this week, there's only 4 combos for the half square triangles, so there's plenty of time to catch up if you haven't started yet, or if you haven't finished your flying geese. This is a perfect time to finish those this week. If you jump on, make sure to say hi so I can make sure I can see comments. I know last week I wasn't seeing comments, and I'm not sure why. Um, I'm not sure. Okay, cool. And yay, I can see him this time. I don't know what happened. I wonder if I accidentally clicked something. Like, the settings are a little different now. So good morning, Anne. Yay. All right. So, um, if you did the 4 at 1 time flying geese method, you may have saw this was the 1 at 1 time flying geese and like totally skipped over this page, not realizing the half square triangles are at the bottom of this page. So, because I know some people that worked ahead, they didn't realize that, and then they had to go back and look for those flying geese or those half square triangles. We will be saving these half square triangles for the 3rd block. So that's, in a few weeks, because next week's block 1, we got block 2, and then we have block 3. I just like making all of the more difficult components at the beginning. That way I just get those more tricky things out of the way, and that way putting all the blocks together goes super quick and super easy. If anybody has questions about half square triangles, please let me know. I know there's several different ways to make half square triangles. In the pattern, this is my preferred method. I know you can make them like 8 at a time. I've never tried that. The only thing that I think when you do that, um, you end up having bias edges on the edges when you do the 8 at a time. This method that I do, the bias edge is right here. So you're not having to worry about edges that could get warped or wonky. So I'm going to get into it. First, you're going to want to see what size you're doing, and it'll tell you what size squares you'll need. It's only going to be 2 colors, and we're only going to make 4 of the combos. So it's going to be super easy. I like placing the lighter color on top. You can draw your line before you pin them together, or you can draw your line after, or before you pin them together, lay them on top of each other. I kind of drew a line with a disappearing ink pen just so you could see it. I typically don't use these just because they do disappear and they dry out so fast. So lately I've been just using a hair marker, which makes an indent in my fabric, and it lasts for days. With this, I think it will reappear if I iron it. But I just did this literally right before I started the video, and it's already fading. And I think it's just because it gets old. I put the caps on too hard, I think, and then they crack, and then they dry out. So that's why I switched to the hair marker. So you're going to draw a line from one point to the other diagonally. And then what I do is I line my foot up on this line, and I sew a 1/4 inch scamp from this side, 1/4 inch scamp from that side. I know some people have trouble with a scant. Since these are made larger than necessary, you're not going to have to worry too much about it until next week. Next week, you're going to want to make sure you have the correct 1/4 inch for the quilt blocks. So I sewed a seam on both sides. If you can see that, it's white thread, so it's kind of hard to see. And then I just use scissors. That way I don't have to worry about my ruler slipping when I'm going to cut them. And then you'll have 2 half square triangles. So I like to set my seam. I don't use steam. I just use a hot iron at the cotton setting. And then I like to press toward the darker fabric. So I just finger press it open and then I'll press. And then when we do that, they'll look like this. So it's slightly larger than needed. Good morning, good morning. Okay, more people are jumping on. I know sometimes like I've gone to see other people's live videos and I know she's going to start at a certain time and I keep refreshing and it doesn't jump on till a couple minutes after she's already started, which is kind of a bummer. So that's why at the beginning I just kind of like, hey. So if you see, I've already trimmed this one down. So it's going to be slightly, almost like a 1/4 inch bigger than you need. When I calculate how to make my half square triangles, I shouldn't have cut those apart. I wanted to tell you guys in case you were ever like, I want to make half square triangles, but I don't know the calculations. So I take the, so your finished size is going to be 2 inches, right? So you add a 1/2 inch for the seam allowances around the half square triangles. And then you're going to add a 1/2 inch for these two seam allowances because that's going to be a 1/4 inch and that's going to be a 1/4 inch. And then I bump it up a 1/4 inch from that. That way you're not making them two size and you're making them slightly larger so you can trim them down. So these are 3 1/4 inches because my finished size is 2 inches plus a half plus a half plus a fourth. So add 1 1/4 inches to the finished size that you want. Finished size is once it's all sewn into the quilt, and that's the size you're going to want. So baby size is 3 1/4 inches. Good morning, good morning. Okay. I'm going to show you how I like to trim them because I know in previous quilt-alongs, some people made them larger and then they trimmed them, but they only trimmed them on like two sides. And then this point did not end up in the point. It had like excess of one of the colors or the other colors. So to get it, so you have perfect point, I bought a ruler set that came with a 6.5 and a 12.5 just because I thought those would be good sizes. And it was like, I had a 40% off coupon at Joann Fabrics, you know? So I got a set. You can get smaller square, but I figure this does most of my smaller squares and then the 12-inch does most of my larger squares. So what I like to do is you want to take note of this diagonal line on your ruler. If you're just using a 6 by 24 inch, they also have the diagonal lines, and this one is your 45-degree angle right there. So you would use that if you don't have a smaller one, which is fine, you know. Use what you have. All right, I'm gonna tilt my screen down just so you can see what I'm doing. Oh, it's upside down. So I think I may have either used this too much or got a little spray base on it because my numbers are a little wearing off. So be wary of spray based getting it on your rulers. So I kind of just try to go as close to this edge as possible. Mine ended up pretty square, but if you can see, like, this line right here is not completely straight. So that's why I don't make them two size. I make them slightly larger so I can square it up and it can be a perfect square. And you want to make sure this line is on this line so that you have both colors at the edge. Perfect amount. Which I don't usually do it this way. I usually do it this way. So let's do it that way. That feels more comfortable. There we go. So now I'm going to want to line this line, since we just trimmed this side, I'm going to want to line that up at 2.5 inches, 2.5 inches. And you're going to want to refer to the bottom of the pattern. Right here, it says trim all of these half square triangles too, and it says what size you need for baby, throw, large throw, queen, and king. So look here at the bottom of the pattern for what size you need. And I probably shouldn't be giving away sizes since this was a paid for pattern, but I figure you guys are all trustworthy and I can. The one thing about the Fiskar rulers, they don't have any anti-slip, which I kind of wish I had rulers that had anti-slip, but they work out. I think they're cheaper than ones with anti-slip. So now you see this is the finished one. It has perfect amounts of each color on both sides, and that's your half square triangle. Does anybody have questions with the half square triangles? I know it is like once you progress from squares and rectangles in your quilt, it's like the next easiest unit to make, I feel like. My first quilt was all rectangles, and then my second quilt was pinwheels with the half square triangle. And I was like, I think it was like 17 when I made that one. And so before that, I just did squares, you know? So I think that is fairly easy. If nobody has questions, I'm trying to think of if there's anything else I wanted to tell you. So we're just making 4 combos, and then I got lots of flying geese still to trim. I ended up getting my light bulb on Thursday, so I was able to finish sewing them on Thursday or Friday. But then Saturday, Sunday, we worked on my bathroom. We're doing a little bit of a what's it called? Remodel, just updating finishes and stuff. So we did tile on Saturday, and Sunday we did some other things in there. So I didn't get any sewing time. So I'm looking forward to that project being done so that I can get more sewing done on the weekends, because next week is block making time. I'm so excited. So next week we'll be making 4 blocks, but they're going to go together super quick because we already have our half square triangles sewn together. So we'll be making 4 of this corner block. Um, and really, since we have the half square triangles together, everything's cut. It's just going to be slapping them together and just making sure you've checked your 1/4 inch seam allowance on your machine. Every machine's different depending on the fabric and the thread you're using. So what you'll want to do is sew 3 strips of fabric together. 2.5 inches is good. And then once you sew 3 of those together, press them. That center strip will want to be 2 inches wide. If it started out at 2.5, you're just going to want a 1/4 inch eaten up from that seam allowance, plus folding over the fabric. So that's going to want to be 2 inches. That way, when you sew all these units and components together, they're going to line up correctly, and all your blocks eventually will line up correctly. When you're making a quilt that every single block is the same, you don't have to worry about that as much. But when we have 3 different blocks in this quilt, for our blocks to end up the correct size, we want to make sure we're only taking up that 1/4 inch when we're sewing our pieces. And a lot of people call it a scant. My 1/4 inch foot, it's just called a 1/4 inch foot. That gives me that scant 1/4 inch. And some people have to adjust their needle a little bit. Just see what works for you. Some people put tape down on their machine so they can measure out where they need to be putting that fabric so that they get that correct seam allowance. It's just a tiny bit smaller than a 1/4 inch on a ruler. That way, you're accounting for the fold in the fabric when you're ironing it. Maula. I'm using a 1/4 inch Creative Grids ruler with a rotating mat. Works great. Awesome. Does Creative Grids have non-slip on the back of their rulers? Because I've heard a lot of people like the Creative Grids rulers. But yeah, so I'm so excited to see everybody's blocks next week. So this week's just half square triangles. If you are working ahead, I'd appreciate it if we just post this week and prior weeks in the group, just because it can be confusing for people and it can stress people out if they start seeing blocks being posted And they're like, "What? I'm behind." No, you're not behind. Some people are just really eager to finish their quilts. So uh, in the quilt along group, I just prefer that you post that week's progress. Yes, it does have anti-slip. I'm gonna have to check out the Creative Grids rulers because I think my 12-inch one is starting to, like, the lines are starting to wear away. I've had this for a few years, and I sew on my tile floor, and so when it falls, it chips, which is not good. So most of my rulers have a little chip on the edge, and same with my hair marker because of the tile floor. All right, I guess I'll let you guys go, and I will jump on here next Wednesday at 9 a.m. to go over block one. And make sure to post your pictures of your half square triangles and your flying geese. I'd love to see them in the group. Everybody else would love to see them too. So I will talk to you guys next Wednesday. Have a great day.